Hey there, welcome to lesson 6 of how to make iPhone apps with no programming experience. And in this lesson, we're going to start module 2, and we're going to build a simplified version of the card game War. So I've got Xcode open here. We're going to start our new Xcode project, and in this lesson, we're also going to build the user interface for our app. And we'll get a chance to work with some auto layout more in depth compared to what we did last time. So I'm just going to click create a new project. Okay, and I'm going to choose single view application. If you don't see these templates, make sure you're looking at the application section under the iOS heading here. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to call this project War, and you want to make sure that your language is set to Swift, device set to iPhone, and core data unchecked. Okay, I'm going to save it on my desktop, and once again make sure source control is unchecked as well. Okay, so we default to our project settings. This is going to be the same at this state. It's the same as our Hello World application that we did last time. It's an empty single view application. We're going to jump straight into our storyboard. So if you aren't familiar with the card game War, what happens is that the deck gets split into two piles, and each player, it's played with two players, each player draws the top card off their deck and then just compares the value, and whoever has the larger value gets the point. And then it repeats like that, drawing the top card off of each other's decks. So our interface is just going to be two cards, or two images representing the two cards with a button. When you click it, it's going to draw the next two cards. So now the first thing you'll notice in this user interface is that it's a big square. So I've gotten some questions already about why is it a square and not a rectangle that represents the iPhone view. Well, you can actually change that down here. You can specify how big your canvas size should be. This default square accommodates all types of layouts, including iPad. So we can even change it to this narrow one. You can see down there that it's the base values for the 3.5 inch, the 4 inch, and the 4.7 inch iPhones in portrait or landscape. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because if you remember from the last episode when we positioned the label, we were doing it based on relative values, based on constraints with auto layout. So at the end of the day, whatever screen size it's going to follow those constraints to position the elements. But this gives us a good visual representation of what we would see when we run the simulator. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is add something called an image view element onto the view controller. And an image view element basically displays an image. And we're going to be displaying the card images like that. So on the right hand corner, if you don't have this pane open, you can click this button to expand it. Okay. Right here in the bottom right is our library pane, if you remember. And I'm going to filter it for image view. So there it is. Displays a single image or animation described by an array of images. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag that on here. Now, it expands kind of to take up the whole space, but I don't need it to do that. I actually know what size it's going to be. So I'm going to click this icon down here for pinning, and I'm going to pin it. I'm going to set the width and the height to 120 and the height to 170. I'm going to click add these two constraints. And now you can see from here that there are two constraints for this image view. So when it gets displayed, when I run it, it's going to follow these two rules and adjust the height and width for this guy. Right now in our interface builder, I can actually update the element to follow those two constraints. So I can click this image view, I can click this icon right here, resolve auto layout issues, and I can say update frames for the selected view. And now you can see that it follows those two constraints and gets this size. However, there are no rules for positioning it right now. So what I can actually do using auto layout constraints again is I can click that image view and I can go like that, and I can click this and anchor it something like 50 pixels from the left edge. Okay, so I'm going to add that constraint. So again, it's not updated for the view. You can see this dotted outline. That's where it's kind of supposed to be based on the constraints. And once again, I can click this one and say update frames, and it calculates what it should look like based on the constraints I've added. Okay, now if I wanted to vertically center this, I can click that. I can this time go to align and go vertical center in the container, and again add a constraint so you can see it's supposed to be there. And I go like this, update frames, so it actually sits there. And right now if I run the simulator, we won't see anything because the image view actually has no image associated to it, so it's going to be transparent. We're going to go over here to the attributes tab for the image view and making sure our image view is selected. I'm going to change the background. So if you click this icon right here, you're going to get a color picker. If you click this right here, you're going to be able to select some from default colors. So I'm going to select the color picker. I'm just going to give it a color so that I can see it, so I can see how it's positioned. So I'm going to run the app at this point just to see how it's positioned. Okay, so there it is. It's 50 off the side. It's vertically aligned, vertically centered, and the height and the width is what I specified it to be. Now if I rotate the iPhone, you can see that it follows the same constraints, right? It's vertically aligned and it's 50 off the edge. Now before we move any further, auto layout and constraints can be frustrating, especially if you're doing it for the first time. Trying to get things positioned based on these rules is not immediately intuitive, but once you do it, you get familiar with it, you do it a bunch of times, it becomes more natural and you know kind of what to avoid and stuff like that. So I'd really recommend that you follow along and just experiment, try things out and lay things out on your screen, add constraints and run it on the simulator, and then see how the constraints affect how it's laid out. So let's say you wanted to edit your constraints. This is what not to do. So don't click your element and then go here and then try to edit your constraints, because these menus down here are just for adding new constraints. What you'll end up doing is having two constraints trying to specify the same thing. Instead, you really want to be looking at this document outline and selecting the constraint that you want to change, and then on the right hand side here you can see that you can edit the values. Okay, so that's how you want to edit your constraints, by selecting it here and then editing it in the inspector pane over here in this tab, this attributes tab. Okay, so now we're going to add a second image view, and it's a good practice to label your elements here. So I can highlight it on the document outline, press enter, and I can just say, first card image, name it like that, because our constraints are going to be, if you have a whole ton of constraints, it's going to be based on the name as well. You can see here, because I changed the name after the fact, that the constraint was created for image view. So if I had changed the name first and then added the constraints, it actually would have reflected the name. Okay. Okay, it doesn't seem to be updating, but we'll do it for the second image view. I'm going to drag another image view, kind of representing the second card. Okay, I'm just going to plop it down there. And now I want this card to be exactly the same size as this one. There's an easy way to do that. You can select them both by holding down Command and then clicking this guy Okay, let's click them right here. So actually, let's rename this guy first. Second card image. Okay, I can hold down Command, and then I can select both of them like that. Okay, now I can go down here to pin, and I can add two constraints to make them equal widths and height. Because I have specified a height and width for this guy, this new image view is going to take the constraints to have equal height and width. So I'm going to do that. You can see right away that constraints have been added to the second, well actually it's added here, but let's go update frames for all views in my view controller. And you can see that now this guy is the same height and width as this guy, but it doesn't have any positioning rules, so that's why it's just flying all over the place. So we're going to click our second card image. We're going to add a vertical center and container constraint, and then let's update that so it's vertically centered, and we're going to add a constraint to make it 50 off the right side. Okay, so let's update the frames. So now you can see that they're more of a mirror to each other. And again, I'm going to change the color of this guy so I can actually see it. Now let's run it. So you can see that they're both vertically centered, they're both the same height and width, and they're both 50 from the edges. And if I rotate it, the constraints kind of keep it together like that. Now at this point, if this is not what you see and this is not how your app behaves, stop the simulator, and what you can do is you can actually delete your constraints. So for example, if something's not working out as you're expecting, I would recommend just delete your constraints and try again. Sometimes it can be a little finicky like that, and it takes a little bit of practice. Or what you could do is you can select your element, you can go here to resolve auto layout, and you can go clear constraints like that to wipe out all the constraints for that element.